The Coros Pace 3 and the Garmin Forerunner 165 are among the best entry-level sports watches. They both offer an incredible amount of features, especially for runners, and still come at a relatively affordable price. Besides many similarities, both watches also have some significant differences, which we will discuss in today's video. Because I've tested both watches extensively and have already published separate reviews for each of them on this channel. In this video we will focus on comparing the two, so you can decide which watch is the better choice for you. So we won't talk again about all of the features of both watches, specifically not about the similarities, but we will focus on the differences. So let's get started and have fun. Let's first address the price. The Coros Pace 3 is currently available for just under $230, while the Garmin Forerunner 165 comes in two versions. In the standard version it's currently priced at around $250, and in the music version, for which you can also load music onto the watch, it's $300. The Coros Pace 3 already has a music storage as standard, so price-wise this watch is a little more affordable than the Garmin Forerunner 165. From the outside, both watches are very similar. They are both primarily aimed at runners, so it's important that the watches are small, light and don't disturb you while running. Therefore, they are both mostly made of plastic. The Coros Pace 3 has a case diameter of 41.9mm and is 11.7mm thick. It weighs 39 grams with the silicone strap, or even only 30 grams if you choose the nylon strap. The Garmin Forerunner 165 is slightly larger with a case diameter of 43mm, the thickness is almost identical at 11.6mm and the weight is also 39 grams. So both watches are small, thin and super light, and in my opinion they are both very comfortable to wear as well. You can operate both watches via touch and buttons on the case edge. However, the Forerunner 165 has a total of 5 buttons for operation, while the Coros Pace 3 has only 2. This is because the top button on this watch also functions as a rotating crown. I personally quite like this type of operation, although I usually prefer to use the touchscreen in everyday life. But everyone has their own preferences in this regard. And the same can be said about the display technology. This is in general one of the biggest differences between both watches. The Coros Pace 3 has a transflective LCD display, while the Garmin Forerunner 165 has an AMOLED display. I've talked a lot about the differences between these two technologies on this channel, but in simple terms, an AMOLED display emits light on its own, while the transflective display only reflects ambient light. As a result, AMOLED displays are significantly brighter, more colorful and have higher contrast than LCD displays, especially in darker indoor environments. As we can see here, the Forerunner 165 is much brighter, the colors are much brighter and simply not as pale as on the Coros Pace 3. Additionally, this is also reflected in the resolution. Both watches have a 1.2-inch display, but the Coros Pace 3 displays 240x240 pixels, while the Garmin Forerunner 165 boasts 390x390 pixels. However, transflective displays are ideally suited for outer use, as they can reflect a lot of light here. Especially now in the summer under sunlight, this pays off. Here the Coros Pace 3 is truly excellent and has the upper hand compared to the Garmin watch under these specific conditions. The display of the Coros watch is also always on, while the Forerunner 165's display defaults to turning off after a few seconds of non-use, but you can also use a separate always on mode here. However, this mode significantly affects the battery life, and this brings us to the next topic. As seen, both watches use different display technologies. Transflective displays, as the one used on the Coros Pace 3, also has the additional advantage that it is very power efficient, so the battery life is usually better on watches using this display technology. But let's take a look at how battery life performs on both of these watches. According to the manufacturer, the Coros Pace 3 lasts up to 17 days with normal everyday use, or 15 days if you activate stress level monitoring. Garmin states that the Forerunner 165 lasts up to 11 days, but this is assuming you're not using the always on mode. With this mode enabled, these figures are approximately halved. During workouts and when utilizing all GNSS systems such as GPS, GLONASS, and so on simultaneously, the Coros Pace 3 is said to last up to 25 hours, while the Garmin Forerunner 165 lasts up to 19 hours. However, each manufacturer has its own approach of calculating these values, which features need to be activated or deactivated, how intensively the watches are used, and so on. So it's not really accurate or valid to compare both watches just solely based on these figures. So let's take a look at how both of these watches stack up head to head on a typical day. On this day I started with 89% battery on both watches. Then I spent 60 minutes in the gym and the battery life afterwards was 87% on both. After that I ran for a run for about 40 minutes and the Forerunner 165 then had 84% and the Coros Pace 3 had 82%. After that I used both watches in my daily life, but I also recorded this video so they were used quite intensively. I also tracked my sleep at night and the next morning the Forerunner 165 had 75% left, while the Coros Pace 3 had 72%. So the Forerunner lost 14%, meaning it would roughly last around 7 days, and the Coros Pace 3 lost 17%, which would make it last around 6 days. So according to my experience, the Forerunner 165 is closer to the manufacturer's specifications. Personally, I don't reach the values that Coros indicates. In general, based on my experience, the Garmin watch has a slightly better battery life, but both are pretty much on par. As mentioned earlier, both the Coros Pace 3 and the Garmin Forerunner 165 are classic sports watches primarily aimed at runners. So let's now focus on the sports and training features. In the training mode, one noticeable difference is that the Coros Pace 3, unlike the Forerunner 165, offers a multisport mode. As a triathlete, you can record all sports in one session with this watch, whereas with the Forerunner 165, you would need to manually start running, cycling and swimming sessions separately. During training, both watches can not only track classic data like distance, pace, heart rate or calories, but also some more advanced metrics. Both include running power metrics, for example. However, the Forerunner 165 can additionally track metrics like vertical oscillation, vertical ratio or ground contact time, while with the Coros Pace 3 you would need to connect external sensors for this. Speaking of which, you can connect external sensors to both watches. However, with the Coros Pace 3 you can only use Bluetooth, while with the Forerunner 165 you can use both Bluetooth and N+. One thing the Coros Pace 3 can track that the Forerunner 165 cannot is grade adjusted pace. This statistic essentially describes the pace you would run on a flat, level surface. So for example, if you're running at a 520 pace on a steep road, the grade adjusted pace would be faster, as you're expending much more effort here than if you were maintaining the same pace on a flat surface. For workout planning, both watches also offer an extra feature where you can specify a target pace. However, with the Coros Pace 3, this target pace remains consistent throughout the entire workout, whereas with the Pace Pro feature on the Forerunner 165, you can develop detailed strategies. For example, you can set the pace to be based on the terrain profile, so you slow down on steep sections and speed up on flat sections, or you can create your own strategies. The real differences emerge during training analysis. After a workout with the Coros Pace 3, for example, the watch displays a training load value and shows your training effect divided into aerobic and anaerobic effects. Additionally, there's an extra widget for training load in the current week, and in the training status widget you can see the effects your current training is having. The Forerunner 165 lacks these widgets. While it does display the training effect for each workout and suggests recovery times, you don't have a widget to keep track on your long-term training loads like you do with the Coros Pace 3. When it comes to everyday health features, both watches, in addition to heart rate monitoring, can also measure metrics like heart rate variability and SpO2 levels, which is your blood oxygen saturation. While you can track these 24/7 with the Forerunner 165, the Coros Pace 3 doesn't offer blood oxygen saturation measurement during sleep. Instead, the watch provides a high altitude acclimatization widget indicating how well you're acclimatizing in higher altitudes, where SpO2 values play a crucial role. Furthermore, the Forerunner 165 offers the morning report, which displays important data and statistics immediately upon waking up to help you start your day. This is a nice feature that you won't find on the Coros Pace 3. Overall, both watches offer some features and widgets that the other one doesn't. The Garmin Forerunner 165 offers a few more statistics during workout recording, while the Coros Pace 3 has more widgets for long-term training analysis and a multisport mode for triathletes. Ultimately, talking about the training, fitness and health features, both watches are more or less on par with each other. And yeah, they both have an incredible amount of features, especially for this price. Both watches, while not being typical outdoor sports watches like the Coros Vertix 2 or Garmin's Epix Pro or Phoenix 7, still require us to talk about the GPS and navigation. Here there is a significant difference. The Coros Pace 3 offers multiband GPS while the Forerunner 165 does not. So both watches can access different GNSS systems like GPS, GLONASS, Galileo and Beidou at the same time, but the difference is that the Coros Pace 3 using its multiband feature can also access different frequencies from different satellites at the same time, which is something that ultimately enhances GPS accuracy as well. Yeah, I could already prove this in some of my previous tests, but there are many different factors that also play a crucial role here, for example the antenna design or in general how both watches are built. So let's take a look at how accurate both watches really are. First of all, to test this, I completed a normal running route through city, forest and residential areas, as well as farmlands. As we can see here, both the Coros Pace 3 shown in red and the Garmin Forerunner 165 shown in blue recorded this very accurately. Unlike some other sports watches, no corners were cut here and everything was tracked precisely. And yeah, there were no significant visible differences between the two watches for this test. If you've been following my channel for a while, which I hope, you know that I always conduct tests under more challenging conditions as well. For this I go into the forest and run on narrow forest trails covering the exact same route back and forth, or at least, yeah, as far as possible. So ideally the recorded outbound and return paths should align perfectly. As we can see, both watches perform quite well here. Compared to other sports watches, both produce very good results with the outbound and return paths aligning closely. Minor inaccuracies are normal and I can't really detect a difference between the two watches, so despite the lack of multiband, the Forerunner 165 is on par with the Coros Pace 3 in this aspect. Regarding navigation, both watches, unlike more expensive models, don't offer topographic maps, but you can still use them for navigation. Each employs simple breadcrumb navigation, so you can create routes via the app or load GPX files onto the watches and navigate based on these. While you won't see all details and points of interest, you'll still have enough information. I find the rotating crown on the Pace 3 particularly useful in this regard for quickly zooming in and out of the maps. But as I said, both watches also have a touchscreen, which is very practical for this purpose as well. Additionally, both watches offer a backtrack feature to guide you back to the starting point. They both also have a compass and a barometric altimeter, so the altitude can be tracked very accurately as well. In addition to GPS accuracy, the accuracy of the optical heart rate monitoring is also crucial. Garmin has equipped the Forerunner 165 with its 4th generation Elevate sensor, while more expensive watches from recent months already use the 5th generation. Coros, however, uses its latest sensor. To test the accuracy of both watches, like always, I wore both the watches and a chest strap at the same time during my workouts and then compared both datasets afterwards. First, let's take a look at one of my running sessions with the data from the Forerunner 165 in blue and the chest strap in red. And yes, this is a truly perfect result. The watch matches the chest strap perfectly in both the initial rise and subsequent fall of the heart rate, with the overall curves almost identical. Therefore, the average heart rate also differs by less than 1 beat per minute. In this second session, my heart rate fluctuated a bit more in general, which the watch also detected well. There were minor fluctuations here and there, but overall the results were very good, with the average heart rate again differing by only half a beat per minute from the chest strap. Now onto the same comparison for the Coros Pace 3. Again, the results are very good. The watch takes a few seconds longer to detect the initial rise in heart rate, but this is normal and perfectly acceptable, and overall the measurement is very accurate. In fact, the average heart rate almost exactly matches the chest strap down to the second decimal place. However, when it comes to strength training, optical heart rate monitoring is significantly more challenging due to the many fluctuations and grip and wrist movements. First, let's look at the results for the Forerunner 165. There are definitely deviations, but both curves are at least very similar, and even if there's a bit of randomness involved in this case, the average heart rate readings from both are almost identical. In this second session, the results were even better. Again, the curves aren't identical, but it's a really good result compared to others. And then this is the result for the Coros Pace 3. Here my heart rate fluctuates quickly up and down repeatedly, but the Pace 3 struggled to keep up. Therefore the curve is much flatter than that for the chest strap, and the average heart rate is off by 7 beats per minute. The result is similar for the second session, just not as accurate. So in terms of the heart rate monitoring, I found that the Forerunner 165 was a bit more accurate for me personally, but this might differ from person to person, and in general, for sports like strength training or high intensity interval workouts, I would always recommend using a chest strap. So which watch is better, the Garmin Forerunner 165 or the Coros Pace 3? As always, this depends on many different factors. Both watches offer some features, widgets and statistics that the other one doesn't. For example, I find the widgets for training load and training status that the Coros Pace 3 offers very useful. On the other hand, I quite like the Pace Pro feature on the Forerunner 165, and on this watch we have a few more advanced statistics such as vertical movement or ground contact time. Despite different sensors and above all multiband or no multiband, both watches produce pretty similar results in terms of their GPS and heart rate monitoring accuracy. The most significant difference is likely the display, and here it simply comes down to what you personally prefer. I've become more of a fan of AMOLED displays like the one used in the Forerunner 165, but transflective displays also definitely have their advantages, especially in sunlight. If you don't care about display technology or even prefer transflective displays, then I would probably recommend the Coros Pace 3, also due to its slightly lower price. Otherwise, I would recommend the Forerunner 165. But as I said, it also depends on which features are important to you. So feel free to leave a comment down below which of these watches you prefer and why. If you found this video helpful or interesting, you could really support me and my work here by giving this video a quick thumbs up, and if you don't want to miss any more reviews or comparison videos like this, you should definitely subscribe to this channel as well. But for now, thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.